Welcome to Destination Linux. If you've just watched the Pewdiepie's latest video and you're now convinced that you need to grow a beard, install Arch, and become a programmer by next Tuesday, pump the brakes. We've got some advice for you before you accidentally turn your laptop into a very expensive paperweight. As you can tell, I'm not Ryan. I'm Wendy, and I'm joined this week with my partners in finding new ways to void warranties, Jill and Michael. We're also diving into something less funny, but it's pretty important. The open source world is hurting folks, especially projects in the Linux community, like the incredible open source lab at Oregon State. It's not all doom and gloom. We're also here to share the story of Pybricks, a Lego-powered open source hero, showing us with the right support, open source can thrive. Now let's get this show on the road toward Destination Linux.
This week, our feedback comes from Astro Cicada. He says, I love your video on Ubuntu, talking about the episode we did for Destination Linux on the latest release of Ubuntu 25.04. And he goes on to say, I think you made some great points on this distribution as it's well known and awesome. Also, I think Windows will dominate because of the whole good Windows, bad Windows, like the pattern they have. Windows 95 is good Windows. Windows ME, bad Windows. There was also a 98 there. So there's 98, then 98 SE. Same kind of thing. Still true. But still, yeah. I get your point. I was just adding into this. The proof is every single time. That's good, then bad. Windows XP, good Windows. Windows Vista, bad Windows. Windows 7, good. Windows 8, bad. Windows 10, good. Sort of. He said sort of. Windows 11, bad. He says, see the pattern? That's why I think Windows 12 will dominate. Also, have you seen PewDiePie's latest video on Linux? We'll get to that in a second. He says, if not, then you should check it out. And Michael, you have to react to it. Anyway, great podcast. Have a great week. This was sent within like a couple of days of that video being coming out. And I have since reacted to it. So you can go check out that video. We'll link in the show notes of this podcast. It's a pretty long reaction, but I think it's solid. And there's tons of chapters. So you can skip around if you want to. But the good Windows and bad Windows thing, yes, thank you, Wendy, for doing it. But the good Windows and bad Windows thing is it's very true, but also that suggests that Windows 10 is good, really. And I feel like I think it's safe to say that Windows is not good anymore at all. Like, just in my opinion, most of what people like about Windows is that the apps that they want to use are available to them. But as far as like Windows platform itself, I mean, there's not a lot of great things about it. There's a few things that are like, okay, that's kind of nice. But for the most part, it's a bit annoying, at least in my opinion.
I would say
I haven't used 11 at all.
It's better than Windows 11. And I have got to use 11 a tiny bit because it's on one of the laptops in the build room for robotics. So I have had to touch it a couple times. And there's far less cruft, I would say, in 11 because they're adding more like layers and additional processing power on top of 11. Though Windows 10 is what actually pushed me onto Linux. So I wouldn't say either is good, but I think we are getting progressively worse in the eyes of a Linux user. Just putting that out there. But not enjoying it.
Yeah. And the whole good Windows, bad Windows thing, that's been throughout time, the odd and even Windows. It's always been been a thing. Yeah, for years.
Yeah, it's crazy how consistent they are with making good and then making terrible.
Yeah.
Right.
I stopped using Windows with like Windows 7. So I was actually beta testing Windows 7, and then when it was now it's ready to go. Thanks for all the free help and work you did for us. Now pay us for your no. Like I'm doing free QA testing, and now you're going to make me pay for it. They're like, well, you get a discount of $50 off the $300. No, peace. I was already using Linux anyway, but that one was like, you know what? I'm done with dual booting. Let's just go straight into Linux, and I've been there ever since. So to me, Windows 7 was bad on principle.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I really was in the world of Linux ever since Windows NT 4. But, I was still using Windows a little bit at work, and, having my students transition to Linux, so in animation. But we had to use sometimes there were tools in Windows NT 4 that we had to use, and even when Windows 2000 came out and Windows XP, a lot of the programs weren't running properly on those platforms, so you still had to use the older Windows NT 4. So
Yeah.
that was a thing.
I mean,
Well,
that's
it's
what
still a
people had to
thing
deal
now.
with XP moving on
Yeah.
to the other systems. Like XP
Yeah.
and Vista had a problem. I think 7 and 8 had a problem or something like that too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, and I
I
have
yeah.
oh, go ahead, Jill.
Oh, yeah. So I had to support all our instructors that used Windows NT or XP or Windows 7 because I was building the labs for the computer art department. But my classroom was Linux. So,
Yes, yes, yes.
Nice.
yeah.
Yes,
I
and
like
I've
it.
Go
got a
ahead.
friend who's accounting, and she hasn't moved to 11 even though she only uses Windows because there's certain software programs that she relies on for her accounting stuff that isn't available on 11. So she's stuck
Yeah.
in, even though it is now almost out of getting updates and stuff.
That's the worst part about the fact that there's people who are using Windows because of the applications, and like
Mhm.
it's mostly the applications, and also the fact that the applications are often lazy enough to not update to the newest version of Windows. Because and the funny thing is that lawyers and accounting people have just they're notoriously their software that is specific for their industry just updates incredibly slow. Like the transition from I knew people like 2 years ago were still using XP because the software they wanted only worked on XP. Like
Holy
that's
cow.
insane, right? But I mean, that at that point, it's you have to redo your entire workflow and do everything from scratch because if you're relying
Yeah.
on that kind of software, it's gonna bite you in the long run. But
Yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, it is what it is. So that's why you use open source. Skip all that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
100%.
Don't have to
Yes.
use those ancient
Provided,
POS systems
yeah.
on
Yes.
Windows XP. Yes.
Right. Yeah. I can't even
Yes.
imagine. I can't even imagine trying to use something like that.
Yeah. And to be clear, for those who are curious, she meant point of sale.
Yes. I have many point of sale computers in my collection.
Probably because you were able to pick them up for a fairly decent price, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Mhm.
Usually they're giving them away free.
Yeah.
That's true,
You don't need
'cause
this
they're,
anymore.
Yeah.
We're upgrading. Here you go.
yeah,
Yes.
very
Yeah.
frustrating. But Windows 11 is pretty much going to be the dominant force for a little bit, and that's
Mhm.
because Windows 10 is going away soon. I think. What month is it? Like 5 months, something like that. 5 or
Something
6
like
months.
that. Yeah. I think it's October,
So
right?
yeah. So for those who are watching this and you're new to Linux, welcome first of all, and just know that if you're kind of like dabbling and you're kind of thinking about whether or not to switch to Linux, we're actually going to be talking about that very soon. But first, if you would like to send in comments to the show, you can go to destinationlinux.net/comments and get your comments read in the feedback section, just like Astro Cicada did. And we actually had a discussion about how to say that. So I hope we got it right. Let us know in the feedback, if we did get it right. If you also want to go to the forum, you can go to destinationlinux.net/forum to send us messages there.
Perfect. And we can get a jump start with all of that fun open source based on Linux stuff. As Linux users, we know what's up. Linux security is non-negotiable. But with threats getting smarter, your security tools need to keep pace without dragging your system down. Traditional agents, they slow you down and leave blind spots. It's time for a smarter approach. That's why Destination Linux is proud to be sponsored by Sandfly Security, the revolutionary agentless platform designed for Linux. Go to destinationlinux.net/Sandfly to see how Sandfly can help transform your security strategy. Sandfly just doesn't detect and respond. It revolutionized security with SSH tracking, password auditing, and drift detection, covering threats from every angle. Whether your system is in the cloud, on-premise, or embedded devices, Sandfly ensures they're all secure without the headaches of agent-based solutions. Listen to what Ken Kleiner, Senior Security Engineer at the University of Massachusetts, has to say. Sandfly is the first product I've seen that accurately and quickly detects thousands of signs of compromise on the Linux platform. Its unique method automates tasks which would be manually impossible. Automation is the key with detection, and Sandfly completely fits this with other requirements. If your organization is using Linux, this should be part of your cybersecurity toolset. Experience the security that not only is effective, but gives you peace of mind. No agents, no downtime, just cutting edge protection.
And we also have a discount code for you at Destination 50. So if you want to get the home edition, you can get 50% off of that home edition by just putting in the code Destination 50. And if you want to learn more about Sandfly, of course, you can go to destinationlinux.net/Sandfly to check out all the stuff that they have. But you can also check out episode 409 of Destination Linux, so destinationlinux.net/409 to see the awesome interview we had with the CEO of Sandfly Security. And we talked about security, obviously, but also how he got into Linux and open source and all that sort of stuff. So check it out, destinationlinux.net/409 and destinationlinux.net/Sandfly to learn more about Sandfly.
Michael, I love the fact that our feedback came asking you to do a review, a watch over of PewDiePie's video, and you've already done it. You actually got to do it like right on the dot, like almost right after it dropped. You did the reaction video. It took a little bit to get it out to everybody.
Well, it depends on what you mean by almost right after, right? Because it took like a couple days. There was people who were saying that they were waiting for me to do it because they knew that was going to happen. And they said some comments of like, you took a while. And like, well, I mean, if you look how long it is, it took a lot of effort to do. People think that a reaction video is just to sit there and record and that's all you do and you just throw it up. No, you do actually have to do some editing, or in this case, Wendy has to do some editing. So thank you for that.
It wasn't that bad. I had an absolute ton of fun doing that. I've actually told you multiple times that I really, really enjoyed doing this reaction video. And it is long form content. This is no short. If you're going to go dive into it, give yourself some time. I suggest like having a screen available, not just listening to it, because Michael's reactions to some of this stuff, Michael's reactions to PewDiePie's reactions are definitely worth watching. I'm just saying.
Oh, really? Mm-hmm. I don't even remember what some of it is now because it's been a while. So I'm actually kind of tempted to see what you're talking about. But this also means that there's a lot of people who have seen the PewDiePie video and are going to be coming to the Linux platform. That's already been seen in the comments on my video, comments on the previous episodes of DL, also on Reddit and a variety of other places. People are joining the platform due to this video, which is great. So welcome, dear PewDiePie viewer. Welcome to the show. Welcome to Linux and welcome to the community. We're happy that you decided to join us in the Linux Funland, but we wanted to give you some tips for your journey. So it's not all, rainbows and lollipops and whatever. I don't even know what the phrase is, but something like that. So there's a lot of great stuff you can do with Linux, but also you can kind of go into like the weeds and, maybe mess up your system. We'll talk about all that sort of stuff. But I just wanted to say, I'm so happy and thankful that my channel has hit 60,000 subscribers. And just like, I don't know, 3-4 months ago, it was like super slow, and all of a sudden it's like, I don't know, skyrocketed. No, I mean, the PewDiePie video definitely helped, but it's not just the PewDiePie video. It has been going for a little while. So just wanted to say thank you, everybody who's joining. And if you haven't, go subscribe. But so if you're new to Linux and you are coming from the PewDiePie video, let's talk about what was on his video, because there's a few things that you couldn't really do in the reaction because it required more discussion. And let's first talk about the distro choice, like the first distro someone should use, because PewDiePie mentions a couple of them. And well, he kind of spends a lot of time on one, but we'll get to that in a second. So what do y'all think is like the best beginner distribution for someone who's listening?
Linux Mint.
Nice. That's a good one.
Because that is actually when we were doing our install fests for Linux Chick-fil-A, that is the distro we start with. And because Cinnamon, it's like KDE, where it's very much like the Windows paradigm. So people coming from Windows understand the layout, and it's Ubuntu based, so it's really easy to install, and it just has, it's really good for new users. It's got a welcome screen, and most of the Ubuntu distros all do. So yeah, Ubuntu just in general, but Linux Mint is a really good first start.
Yeah, that's a good one. I agree. It's on my list as well. Wendy, what do you think?
There are several different distros that I've handed to new Linux users in my life. So Linux Mint is one of them. Kubuntu is another one. And one of the reasons why I like it is it can have that feeling of Windows. Some of the menu structures are the same and the like. It's also what I run. So if they have questions and they call, I'm one of those people that have to see it in order to talk you through it. So for me, if I'm helping someone out along those lines, if I'm on the phone with them, I can literally walk them through the steps as I'm doing on my system, which is also really nice. I've also handed Elementary to people. And one of the things that I've liked about Elementary in the past is if it was a Surface device, I didn't have to install that additional kernel on top of it. So if you're new, then you don't want to worry about installing different kernels. You want everything to work out of the box. And with that one, on a Windows Surface device, touchscreen worked, all of that was pretty awesome. And then I've also handed Fedora over as a new device, but I only handed Fedora over to new Linux users because I was the one doing that tech backend. So really, I did pace that on like, what are you doing with your system? But I'd have to agree with Jill. An Ubuntu base for your start is 100% the best way to go in most cases.
The other one I really like in the Ubuntu world is Ubuntu Studio. Now, particularly for my students, my animation and art students. So that's where I show them using Blender and GIMP and all the tools. So it's and that one, so a lot of my new students have started on Ubuntu Studio, and it runs very well, like Maya and the other proprietary animation software. In fact, I was just showing one of my students, demonstrating it to them yesterday, in fact. And now they're starting to use Ubuntu Studio. So
I thought you were retired, cool. Jill.
I'm still working. I'm still working part-time.
Not retired.
I am retired from full-time, though.
Well, retired, air quotes.
Yeah,
so, so I think that Linux Mint is a great choice. I also think that Kubuntu is another good choice, especially if you're, like what Wendy's saying, that you're using it and it kind of helps you to guide people through it. I feel like not everything Ubuntu based, because there's a lot of stuff there's some stuff that's specific to a particular type of a device that is made based on Ubuntu, but is made for that particular device and stuff like that. Yeah. So not everything is going to be, but if it's Ubuntu based, it probably is good to go usually. And I would say that also I put on the list is Zorin. I think
Zorin. I forgot about that one, but yeah.
The only downside of Zorin to me is that it's an older base. So some of the packages and some of the applications will be much older. But that's like the only thing, because the kernel is updated and the Mesa drivers are updated to the hardware enablement. So it does get, support for that stuff much quicker than you would imagine if it was just like the older style of LTS, thanks to Ubuntu's hardware enablement stack. But I think it's a solid option. And if your hardware works just fine and you don't need the latest and greatest of some software. Now, you can use Flatpaks and get stuff much newer. But if you're using like the repo stuff, you might run into some older packages. So that's the only kind of hesitation I would have for Zorin. But I'd put Zorin really in the top 3 or top 5 of beginner distros, because they do a lot of cool stuff. The fact that you can just run an exe file and it'll tell you whether or not they have something that you could use instead, or if it like helps you set up wine and things. It's very cool. So,
well, and I can't believe that I forgot about that one because 3 of my kids are actually running Zorin Education on their laptops right now.
well, yep. I'm glad I
Yeah,
could
that
remind you
makes
about that.
I know kids that are running Edubuntu, so
Mhm.
that's a good one too.
Yeah. That one's fine. That one's kind of, for me, it's more if you're in like an educational value and you want to have specific apps like that are in that space, that makes sense. But but you might as well just be using Ubuntu GNOME
Right.
for like the proper version and otherwise. But I do think that you were talking about how elementary is a good option. I do think elementary is a good option for people who like the the Mac vibe because it does kind of fit that. It's an older style Mac, but it still kind of fits that. But I like the mention of Ubuntu Studio. That is a really good one because for those who don't know, it's basically Kubuntu because they take the kind of the desktop that Kubuntu has, which is they use the same one, but they also take the packages from Kubuntu, and then they add on some audio and video production type of stuff, which is really cool. It used to be much more impactful when they had Jack by default because that was annoying to do, but they have switched to Pipewire now. But there's still a lot of stuff they do to make it even better. So if you are wanting to do some kind of media production or content creation or whatever, it might be something to look into.
Well, and it's a good thing to note that when I first switched to Linux, that was how I found some of that open source software. Was of course Corora's not around anymore. I'm super super sad. That was my first Linux home. That was my beginner distro, and I'm so thankful that I know people call it like heavy at this point or sometimes bloat. So you can get light versions if you want that are pretty basic. But one thing that I loved about it is it did have Darktable and some of these other open source projects, applications pre-installed that I could play with and be like, oh yeah, there is this alternative. And it gave me the time to learn them without having to go dig for them. So it is nice to have some of those applications pre-installed. Don't be afraid of the distros that do have some other stuff pre-installed on it because play with them. You might find an application that you like and use.
That's a great point because a lot of people want to know like what they would use as an alternative when they switch over because some applications are not going to be available to you. It is
Right.
what it is. If it's made by Adobe, it's not going to work. You can probably use a virtual machine or maybe do some finagling with wine and that sort of thing, but typically speaking, it's not going to be there because Adobe is if you've already watched the Pewdiepie video if you're that the people we're talking to, so what we feel about Adobe because it's pretty much the same thing. But let's move on to a different subject that's related to this, but just something that like the number one thing or maybe top 3 things or whatever that you would suggest someone make sure they avoid doing or avoid listening to or whatever you want to to tell people to avoid when they first start switching.
For me, I think the number one thing, and I know my co-host on Linux Out Loud would be 100% on board with this, is if you're having issues and you find a resource that says, hey, just put these things into your terminal, please don't do that unless you understand 100% what that means and what it's going to do to your system. The Linux community is awesome, but it is one of those situations that you don't want to execute code that you don't understand what it's going to do. And so I'd say that the biggest thing is there's so many ways to do things in the GUI now. If you need help, try to find those help resources that do it inside the GUI and not inside the terminal. And then when you're comfortable and you actually understand what those commands mean, then by all means, go ahead and execute them.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, there's definitely some stuff you're going to find in tutorials that would be okay, probably, but there are also going to be things that are just random. And you were talking about how the Linux community is great. It is. Welcome to Linux community. But just like any community, there's some annoying ones in there too.
Yes.
There's people who are going to try to troll you. There's people who are going to say something that's like not even considering that you're new and stuff like that. Like they'll give you suggestions of here, just do this. It's so easy, and then insert thing that takes hours to figure out because it's easy to them because they already know. But I do think that's a very good point. Jill, do you have anything?
Yeah. So I was thinking along the lines of what distros to maybe avoid for first-time users.
That's a good one.
Yeah, like Slackware and I hate to say this, Arch, just because
I don't hate to say that at all. Definitely Arch.
Yeah, it's not a
not a beginner distro. Yeah.
yeah, not a beginner distro.
So there's like a little bit of an
Any
asterisk.
rolling mostly, except for OpenSUSE roll.
Even OpenSUSE Tumbleweed or their slow roller, kind of not really for beginners. Like they're cool, they're
not,
cool,
yeah.
but and they have some. They're more friendly to beginners than Arch, but that doesn't mean they're friendly to beginners. It's just like Arch is like the example of not at all. But if you do, like, just to be real quick, this kind of gave me like a thing that I wanted to like popped in my head out of this. When you said Arch, I thought, well, we should talk about it in this like two configurations. There's two types of branches here. There's the most people, which is like people who just want the system to be installed and then work, and then that's it, and just use it. That's most people. And I'd say 90% or maybe a little more are those kind of people. Then don't use Arch. If that's what you want, it's not, Arch is not your friend. However, if you want to learn how the system works, if you want to force yourself into a lot of pain in getting your system running and learning how all the things interconnect with each other, Arch will help you do that. Now, there is a new Arch install system that makes the installer a lot easier. There was a post on Reddit after PewDiePie's video came out saying, like, why do people think Arch is hard if the installer is so easy? It's a brand new thing that came out like a couple years ago. The reputation for Arch is because of 20 years or so. And they used to not have an installer whatsoever. You just had to read through a Wikipedia, or not a Wikipedia, but a wiki, the Arch wiki, that is good, but also very esoteric in how it explains everything. So even a beginner wouldn't understand. I mean, even people who are like using Linux for years might not understand it if they're not digging into the system, because the wiki, it seems like it purposely tries to make things complicated. I've actually posted stuff on the wiki that explains something in a sentence, like a single sentence, and then they split it up into 3 different pages. I'm like, how did you even do that? Like,
make it more complicated.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And going back to my previous distro, which is Slackware, where I learned Linux back in 1992, it was the only Linux distro.
That's true.
You didn't have a choice. But today's modern Slackware is much easier. They have slapt-get, which is like apt-get on Debian. And
nice.
I mean, but it's better than it used to be, but it's still super hardcore.
Exactly.
Right. Yes.
But at least today they don't have to insomod packages and modules to get their sound cards working. So
there's that. There's that.
Yes. Which we expect with modern distributions, right? Is to not have to go and pull some of that stuff in. I mean, I still manually pull in some stuff for my Epson printers so I can get full use of them. Usually, it's inside the distribution. If it's not, then Cups works actually really pretty good. But I do a lot of additional things with that. And I'd have to add on to Michael's comment is it's not just Arch, but Arch-based distros are not something else that I would say, hey, kind of avoid for now. Yeah, you can easily get Manjaro, Garuda, and some of those other ones installed on your system. But unless you are going through and reading the notes before you do updates, then you could run into issues where your system doesn't boot at all anymore. And if you're running one of those distributions like that, you need to be okay with going and reading the notes, seeing what's going on, and deciding whether or not to update or whether you need to wait for that bug or whatever to be fixed. So not just Arch, but Arch-based distros are something to kind of stay away from unless you want to dig into that.
And of course, Gentoo.
Portage
does make it a lot easier, but Gentoo is...
It's funny when like Jill keeps trying to be like, it's a little easier with slap-get. It's a little easier with Portage. It's still not even easy at all. It's just imagine what it used to be like.
Exactly.
Yes. Yes.
So I agree. These are definitely it's a very good point, Jill. This is something that people should avoid is these kind of distributions. And I do think that Arch-based distros, like Wendy is saying, is a good point, because a lot of people think that because it's based on Arch, you get all the benefits of Arch and none of the bad stuff, even though they work very similar. All you're doing is skipping the installation problem. And also the customizations are done for you and that sort of stuff. So they are cool. The Arch-based distributions can be very cool. There's a lot of them. There's a lot of nice ones, but it is a good point because the manual intervention is what they call it. If something goes wrong, you don't look at the blog post on the Arch Linux website that tells you something went wrong and you update, then your system could just not work. And that's a thing that Arch users and anyone who's using an Arch-based system have to deal with, unless they're doing some kind of immutability, then it's a little different. And that's a more complicated topic. If you're curious about what that means, you can check out a previous episode of DL where we talked about immutability, and I explained what it is and also how that word is not accurate at all, but people still use it.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I agree with all those things. Let's move on to the next topic of what people should do. Like, what's the most important things people should do is backups. In my opinion, you should have a backup. And this doesn't mean, just because you're switching to Linux. It doesn't mean you're jumping around to different distributions or anything. Always have backups. There's been times I learned the hard way. A drive just randomly stopped working, and I had to run. I think it was test disk. Is that what it was?
Yeah. Test disk. Yeah.
So I had to run that, which took like 12 hours.
Forever.
Constantly running.
Yeah.
And it gave me like this garbled output of random files with random file names. The only thing I knew what they were was based on the file extension. Like, I knew it was an MP4. What's on it? But I don't know.
Who knows?
So here's the truth about that. That was like 10 years ago. And I have backups now. I still haven't finished going through that giant drive. Because it was so many files. There was like thousands of files, and they're just gibberish. Especially the ones that are like the harder things to do, like a video. I can't scan it through like a grep or something to figure out an automatic like breakdown of what things in a text file are. Anyway,
and sometimes
people.
the three character extension is not even there, so you just got to this is a big file, so let me see, this is probably a .mp4. Another good tool.
Will it play if I add that?
Yeah. So the other tool I used to use with my students all the time was PhotoRec, because that was a good way to rescue their flash drives with their artwork on it. I think it was
PhotoRec that I used. I think Test Disk makes PhotoRec or something.
Yes, correct. Yeah, it's a suite.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think I used PhotoRec, and it worked very good.
Yes.
But what it does is tries to find all the bits and then smash them together. So it can't give you like the exact stuff you had. And this has nothing to do with the operating
Linux.
system.
Yes.
Yeah. I was using Linux at the time, but that's just because I have been for years. But the problem was just like the drive was failing, and I didn't know that. So when I did a test afterwards, and after I scanned it and got all the stuff off, then I was like, okay, it said it was basically at the point of like no return anyway. So I learned the hard way. Learn from my mistakes. And,
yes,
always,
and do 3 backups of everything. Have local, have cloud, do a USB flash drive or an external drive, and have one not at your home.
Yes. I know that's one thing that Bill says from Pseudo Show, and he's also helped on Linux Out Loud a few times, is if you don't have 3 backups, then you don't have a backup, is typically the way he puts it. Have the redundancies.
Absolutely right. I started teaching that to my students way back in the 80s, the late 80s, early 90s, and with floppy disks, because animation files notoriously make the floppy disk die, because they have to make it work really, really hard. And that was our main form of backup. So trying to get like 3 GIF images off a floppy disk and constantly reading it would kill it. So there were
Mhm.
projects where not only your backup would die, but the third set of floppy disks would die.
Oh my god.
And that was it was horrible. It was absolutely horrific.
Right?
And having
Side note.
just imagine having to do a 3 to 5 minute animation using floppy disks. That was my life.
That's crazy. I want to know,
That was
like,
before
on average,
SideQuest and Zip and hard drives were cheap enough.
right? On average, how many floppy disks did you go through a year?
Oh gosh, thousands. I've shown some of them here on the show on my treasure hunts.
Yeah, well, I know you've shown, like,
Yeah.
projects, like, full
Yeah.
projects and, like, it's massive
Yeah.
things that how many times are you
know.
throwing them away or recycling them, whatever, because they were no longer good? They've lived their life and they were
Yeah,
done.
fortunately, most of mine were good because I've stored them
Oh, good.
correctly, and I haven't had too much a problem. But there is, every big project I would have, there was be at least 2 to 10 that would stop reading.
Right.
And
Wow.
so
2 to 10. Wow.
yeah, but I had
yeah.
to. It was still a lot, and I made sure to get the highest, and I always had the Maxell floppy disk because they were always they lasted the best.
Oh, that's good.
So,
That's
yeah.
Yes.
And there were some other
for
really
those
good
who are
brands.
curious, if you're wanting to get the tip on floppy disks,
still no go.
Maxell
Yeah,
or
go.
Yeah.
yeah. But-
Maxell.
Yeah, I agree that 3 is important. You should absolutely have 3 because the whole point is that if your backup fails, you have a backup of your backup and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But don't make backups of your backups. Just make multiple backups.
Yeah.
That's
exactly.
a little different. But also having like a NAS or something like that. There's many ways, but it's just good to have it. And if you have you can also control what you back up. You don't have to back up everything. There's stuff that's the most important to you. That's also good.
Absolutely.
Whatever you're okay with losing, you don't have to back that up.
Exactly.
But otherwise.
So for most people, that's like pictures, right? Especially pictures of kids, pets, family, whatever. That is definitely stuff you're going to want to make sure you're backed up. Yeah. Any other important data that you have, documents, whatnot, that you would be devastated if you lost, or it would become a hardship if you lost.
Yeah, exactly. So
your download folder, probably not.
Well, some people just leave everything in downloads folder.
That's true.
And also the fact that if you sometimes will, if you have a device that you're syncing to your computer, it'll always put it in the download folder, and you forget it's there. And so maybe download folder too. But
that could be bad. Yeah.
Hopefully this is helpful to you. So everybody who is coming to the channel and the community from the PewDiePie video, hope that helped. And let's move on to the next topic. And this is it's an interesting topic, but it's a little sad. Hopefully, we can help make it less sad by the when the episode comes out. People can get involved and that sort of thing. So, Jill, what is this topic about?
Many open source projects in the Linux community are suffering from lack of funding. Yeah, everything's just gotten more expensive, so not as many people are donating to open source projects.
And if you count this as an open source project, then also true.
Yeah, absolutely. And the awesome people over at the Open Source Lab, OSL, at Oregon State University is actually no exception. OSL has been operating for 22 years. And they provide infrastructure for over 500 open source projects, including some of the ones we've talked about today, including Alpine Linux, BusyBox, CentOS, Fedora, Debian, Deluge, FFmpeg, Postmarket OS, Inkscape, Firefox, GNOME, MacPorts, Haiku, Lineage OS, Gentoo, Tor, Qemu, and hundreds of others.
I thought you.
Right now, I'm kind of
list
panicking.
Everything.
Yeah, just based on what you've read.
I know.
Right, I've got a panic going on.
I know. It's scary. And many of us Linux users have downloaded Linux distros hosted and compiled on the open source lab servers over at Oregon State University. This is how I found out about the Open Source Lab, who has been hosting and mirroring some of my favorite Linux and open source projects for the last 22 years, including the Linux kernel, the Apache Software Foundation project, and Mozilla. So heavy hitters in the industry.
Yeah, in fact, it was Mozilla 1.0 was hosted on the OSL. Yeah.
Yeah, that sure was. Yeah, Michael. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, and OSL, unfortunately, will shut down later this year if they cannot secure $250,000 in committed funds soon.
If they can,
If.
that's a lot though. That's a lot.
Yeah, it is a
But
lot of money.
also, so real quick, the funds are needed. They listed out what they needed for $150,000 for staff pay, $65,000 for student pay, and also other expenses. They didn't explain what that means, but like administrative tasks, that sort of stuff, for $35,000. So it's a significant amount of money, but the downside of this, in fact, obviously this is potentially a downside completely, but we didn't find out about this until like maybe a week ago, something like that. So there's only a few days left to participate after this episode comes out. So if you want to help out, hopefully we can get enough people involved in wanting to help, in addition to all the other articles and stuff that's being posted about this, because it's very important. It is like a really fundamentally important project and also they help all kinds of other fundamentally important projects. So it would be fantastic if we could all collectively help out. But you only have until the 14th. So we are recording this on the 7th.
7th.
Yeah, this will come out. I'm pretty sure it will come out on the 12th. So you'll have 2 days. I'm glad we could give you this amount of time.
Massive heads up. There we go.
I'm sure they'll take donations after that. They're just, what it is they were asking to get, so they know the numbers of the donations, so they can tell the higher ups. So
and we forget that Linux isn't free, right? It takes power to run these servers and people to maintain them, and hardware needs replaced, and people need paid for their time there at the university. So while we definitely reap the benefits of all the amazing stuff that is being done, that's being hosted there, it's not free. So
to be fair,
whatever
I feel
we can to do our part.
Hosting's expensive.
I think that the idea that Linux is free is probably detrimental to it.
Yes.
Because people look at it in the sense of free, as in like it's free because it's not, there's not much to do in it. There's not like
I don't have to pay a prescription in order to install this. I don't have to.
It's good that you have that because the barrier to entry is low, and it means that people who can't afford to can still use it, and that's great. I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. I'm saying the reputation of it is two ways of bad. Because people say you get what you pay for, and if it's free, it's obviously bad, and that's what people say. But also, people have they take it for granted because it's free. They imagine that it doesn't take that much effort to make it exist. When it's the opposite, it is a ton of work. Like every distro you use, there is a ton of work involved in it. Even distros that are based on other distros, they're still doing a lot of work themselves. And they're also benefiting on the underlying base because there's also work being done there. So there's a ton of effort being put into all these different types of projects. So it's kind of a double-edged sword in terms of like using the term free, because people think that it doesn't require a lot of effort when it's mountains and and mountains,
storage space,
and mountains and mountains.
Yeah. And also, howtogeek.com states, in addition to helping the larger open source software community, the group employs Oregon State undergraduate students with paid engineering internships. Everyone wins. Students get a job, and you get to download your favorite Linux distribution for free. And that's very, very, very important. I've actually had some students that have gone to Oregon State and gotten involved in that project. So
cool.
That's
awesome. And also, there's the whole. There's a lot of comments that are people talking about how one of them says like there's one staff member that would get 150,000, and people are talking about how they're asking like why do they need that much? And that's the reason I was bringing up the whole free thing, is because the amount of work is enormous. And this is like one person maintaining all this stuff. And in that sense, 150,000 that's underpaid though. That's like not even close to what they're probably doing. But I just wanted to kind of put that out there because it does seem like a high number if you don't have the context of what they're doing.
Yeah.
And unfortunately is we don't really know exactly what they're doing, but based on the stuff that they have on their, I don't know, their menu, I don't know, for lack of a better word, of what they work on, they obviously have to be doing a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, many companies, which is what we would expect, including like Postmarket OS, Rocky Linux, and
Gross.
Inkscape, are calling for support for the OSL, of course. So if you're interested in becoming a corporate sponsor, check the source links in our show notes for contact information. Otherwise, anyone can donate through the OSU Foundation, which is an IRS 501c nonprofit corporations. And all the links to all this information is in our show notes. And I wanted to say that I've been donating to OSL off and on over the years. And I actually just did it again yesterday because this is so important for the open source community and
very much
supporting open source. This is huge. Huge.
That's
well,
awesome.
For me, and Michael, right? FFmpeg is on the list of projects that's on here. I could not edit this show in particular on Linux without it.
Yeah.
Couldn't do it.
Yeah. It's the back end for most of our audio video programs on Linux. Yeah.
I mean, pretty much everything. I'm pretty sure that all the players and the editors all use FFmpeg in some way. It is very fundamentally important. And I even use FFmpeg in the command line for certain things because it turned out to be faster. Not easier.
Yeah.
That's another thing that the PewDiePie viewers should learn about.
For FFmpeg in the terminal before, 100%. Absolutely.
And it's very esoteric how it works and everything. But like, real quick, for those who are like the PewDiePie viewers we were already talking to, if you're still watching, thanks. But also, there are times you'll hear someone say the terminal's easier, the terminal's faster, or whatever. It's not always faster. It's not always easier. Sometimes it is, and a lot of the time it isn't. So just use whatever you feel comfortable with. And if you want to go and dabble with the terminal, then that's cool. But you don't really have to. And that's a very important thing. These days, when we were talking about Slackware and Arch, you did have to. But now, these days, you don't have to.
There's a lot of GUI stuff, that makes life sometimes easier.
All right, so the next topic we're going to talk about is something that Wendy is bringing to the show. And this is a very cool project because it's basically Legos and Python and how they meet together.
How they are mashed together.
Oh, yes, nice. Tell us about
I
this
have
Pybricks
gotten to
thing.
use Pybricks now for the last, goodness sakes, at least 2 years. I've been using Pybricks personally. And what it is this is open source platform for coding with Python on all sorts of Lego hubs. So my robotics team in particular uses a Spike Prime hub. Mindstorms are still around for a lot of you out there. And I know they've been actively working to keep the Mindstorms alive. Lots and lots of different hubs, the train hubs and all kinds of different things. They have written firmware for these hubs so that you can code on them. And one of the amazing things that Pybrick has is incredible documentation. So if you're just getting started with Python, MicroPython in particular, and you're wanting to learn, their documentation is fantastic. I know this year for the robotics team in particular, if they'd ask me questions, I was like, hey, have you checked the documentation first? Because it is that good. Even my younger kids on the team, 10 and whatnot, it is very easy for them to find that information in the documentation, and it's cross-platform. You can use it on Windows if you're still using it right now, those PewDiePie users out there. You can use it on Macs, Linux, a Chromebook, Android, because it runs inside of a browser. Unfortunately, it does have to be a Chrome-based browser. I have had a conversation with those who are working on Pybricks and said, there's anything Firefox-based, they've already said that they won't be able to do. And a lot of that has to do with the communication between Pybricks itself as an application and the hub and being able to transfer.
Not because they don't
technical
want to.
limitations. Well, and they've they play it as security. So I will drop the link to that for Michael inside here, and where they go through and say why they are not opening up the availability for us to use Firefox or a Firefox-based browser for this. But just so you know, you will have to use something Chrome-based, but there are some good open source ones out there. They have really nice control as far as being able to do your motors, your sensors. It has IMU or gyro capabilities built into their stuff. I know our team uses the gyro on a regular basis. Really, really awesome stuff. And even though it's made in a browser, you can still use it offline. That is, I guess, an advantage of it being potentially a Chrome base, is you can save it right as an application. You don't need to be connected all the time in order to use it. Great for education, great for people who are just wanting to play. And one of the reasons why I wanted to bring this topic to the show, especially after what Jill was talking about, is how they are funding Pybricks. So it is free for anyone to use the written Python portion of Pybricks. But they have recently come out with what they call their drag and drop or the icon block-based programming. And if you would like to use that, then you need a subscription for it. So that could be joining their Patreon. If you join their Patreon, you automatically get a key to use it. You can buy lifetime-based ones in which you buy it once and you as an individual have it for life. You can buy ones for the team, which every year I have 10 licenses in which I can use on different team laptops, or even for a school, a perpetual license for a school. So they've got lots of different functionality in how you can get those licenses. It is not required, right, in order to use the program. But if you want this edition, there's a way to support them.
That's very cool. And also, I like the fact that this Pybricks Lego thing has a way to like configure everything and program it with like Lego type of approach. Like the interface is putting things together and like puzzle pieces and stuff. So I like that. Good.
Yeah, it's really cool. I love the Mindstorms. I've seen demonstrations of that before, and the Spike Hubs too. That's really cool. But the Mindstorms, actually, a friend of ours helped develop that for that toy. Yeah.
Well, that's
So
awesome.
that was cool.
That's currently what we've been using for camps, for our robotics camps for the last few years. We actually teach robotics camps to kids, and we've been using the Mindstorms, and they're no longer being made. Lego has discontinued them. And unfortunately, a lot of that time means they're discontinued the applications or stuff that run them. And it's one of the things I love about Pybricks is they found out Lego was discontinuing them. They're like, how can we help? You know, a lot of the times the same way we do with Linux is I've got this older system, I've got this older robotics hub. How can we keep it going for as long as possible? Our kids this year, our team was able to get a grant, and so we'll be able to use the Spike Prime hubs this year for camps. And I guarantee you, we will be running Pybricks on those camps. I'll come to you more if you want to hear all about that. Go check out Linux Out Loud. Yes, shameless plug, because I'll be talking about as we're working on how we're going to create that class structure for camps using Pybricks. But it's thanks to this amazing open source program that I feel like I can teach Python in two ways. The way they have designed their block code reads so similar to the same way that MicroPython reads. And so we could start kids on blocks and easily transition them into written Python.
That's pretty awesome. And also, shameless plugs are totally fine. Of course, I'm a big fan of them myself.
Big fan.
But I mean, I did mention my channel and also the video for the Pewdiepie reaction and everything. So
multiple
big fan.
times, yeah.
Yeah. Now again. But it's interesting that the Lego thing, they stopped doing Mindstorms, and that is a shame because people who have been using it for a while, want to keep using that sort of stuff. But maybe, a little bit of, devil's advocate for Lego. Maybe it's because they didn't want to have the fear of getting lightning strikes in the Mindstorm.
To be fair, their non-education hub, they still call it a Mindstorm, so I don't know that your dad joke necessarily works there. Yeah. It's just different color. The official education Spike Prime one is yellow, And the one that they're calling the new version of the Mindstorm is like a bluish green on the base. But I will insert a picture here of the Mindstorms that are talking about, the old school, the generation before the Spike Primes. But yeah.
Gotcha. Well, I guess yellow lightning is bad then.
Yeah.
I don't know. But this is pretty cool. Thanks for bringing this. Is there anything else you wanted to talk about with the Pybricks?
I don't think so. I talk about it all the time on Linux Out Loud. Go check that out.
There you go. Go check out Linux Out Loud. This is very cool, and I love the fact that it helps people, helps kids learn coding in a way that's accessible and that sort of stuff.
Fun.
That's fantastic. So absolutely go check it out if you haven't. But that's it for our show. Thank you for watching this episode of Destination Linux. Thanks to Wendy for joining us on the
last
show.
minute too.
Yeah. I gave her like 2 days, I think, heads up, maybe.
About that, yeah.
Yeah, so that's better than before. There was a couple times. The worst time was maybe like I think Jill had the worst experience where before Jill joined the show. Yeah. It was I think we gave her 15, 20 minutes.
Oh,
I think.
Yeah, when I literally 15 minutes, and guess where I was? I was laying in bed.
Oh,
literally.
Well, I'm glad I was able to fill in last minute. I'm glad you're feeling better, even though this was a long time ago.
Thank you.
So thanks for joining us, Wendy, and a big thank you to each and every one of you for supporting us by watching or listening to Destination Linux. However you do it, we love your faces, and you can join us in our Discord server at tuxdigital.com/discord and have all kinds of conversations about everything. It's Linux. It's there's even like some sports stuff that's happening. There's hardware discussions, music, meme, whatever you want. It's a full community at Discord, the tuxdigital.com/discord. And we also have a lot of cool ways to interact with us that you can do in general in the Discord, but also we have some cool perks for our patrons. So if you want to support the show and get a bunch of cool perks, you can become a patron by going to tuxdigital.com/membership, where you can watch the show live as we record it. You can check out unedited episodes that we release for patrons exclusively, and so much more, including merch discounts at our store at tuxdigital.com/store. That's right. There's tons of cool merch there. Just go to tuxdigital.com/store and you can check out the t-shirts, the hoodies, the mugs. There's so much more, hats, and there's so many things to list. Just go check it out. tuxdigital.com/store.
And make sure to check out all the amazing shows here on Tux Digital, including Catch Wendy on Linux Out Loud.
Definitely.
They're so much fun to listen to. And we have an entire network of shows to fill your whole week with geeky goodness. Head to tuxdigital.com to keep those Linux penguins marching.
Everybody, have a wonderful week. And remember, the journey itself is just as important as the destination. Jill loves you.
Aww.
Nice. Most of you.
Yeah, most of you. Yes. No,
Jill might love
Ryan
everybody,
loves most of you. Jill loves everybody. Yes, most definitely.
Probably.
And as a side note, if you are checking out Linux Out Loud, it is far more like chasing an ADHD rabbit than it is the show. We're all over the place. So just so you know, if you're showing up, we might jump from topic to topic, but it's a journey to take anyway.
Yeah, this one was kind of that a little bit. This episode, I think Wendy brought some of the Linux Out Loud into DL for this episode.
Yeah, definitely.
But it was great to have you on the show, Wendy, and everybody. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next week.